Hello. Welcome to this workshop all about WordPress and more specifically how to customize your site as opposed to like fully hand coding your site where you have full flexibility. WordPress allows you to do like a no code solution. It does have some caveats of you might struggle a little bit to figure out how to get things exactly how you want them to look. But this workshop will hopefully teach you some skills and techniques that you can do to get the content that you have on a WordPress site closer to what you want it to look like. So I'm going to be using a fully hosted WordPress site. WordPress offers two different types of sites that you can use. The first is the free WordPress.com site. So this is if like I know the class ASCJ 200 uses this. If you want to get started with a free, really basic, really simple site, you can go to WordPress.com, log in, and create your site through there. The other option is a hosted site, which is where you purchase a hosting plan from somewhere, or if you're in like Journalism 414 or the graduate PR program, you get it from Annenberg, at least while you're in school. And then WordPress is installed and you get a bunch more features. It's a little bit more fully fledged. How many of us are using this free WordPress.com site? Okay, cool. There are going to be a little bit more limitations on this one because it is a completely free site. If you go to plans and pricing, you can also see that as you get started, you can like buy more stuff if you want to spend more per month. But with the hosted sites, when this is like a paid thing as well, you get a little bit more features. So there might be some stuff that I show in this that looks slightly different, but a lot of the core stuff is going to be the same. You might have less themes available for you to choose from, and you might have less customization options. And one big one that we are going to cover at the very end is like how to add additional like CSS code to the site. And that is not available on a WordPress.com site. Okay, cool. So how many of us have never used WordPress before? Cool. So we'll do a very brief introduction to WordPress so we're all on the same page. So when you log into WordPress, you will get this kind of dashboard right here with all of these options over here in your menu. And the main things that you want to look for are these posts and pages. And so these are both very similar. They kind of do the same thing, and they allow you to add different web pages that you can add like text and images and other types of elements to. The main difference is that pages are meant to be a little bit more static, meaning that you're not changing them as much. So this would be something like an about page, a resume page on your portfolio, contact me page. It's stuff that's not changing super often, and you don't need to categorize in any way. Posts are more for things that are going to be published at a more regular cadence. So if you're going to be doing like a bunch of blog stuff and like each week you're going to talk about something different, that's probably better suited for a post because you can categorize them all. And it also will show newest to oldest when you have like a post page or showing your posts all in one section. That's the main difference. But as you go into them, so either click pages or posts, and if you already have one, you can just play around with that. If you don't, you can click add new page or add new post and create some content real quick. I'm going to be using this sample page that I have created. And as you hover over it, if you already have one, you can click edit to go into the editor. And this works the same for posts and pages. This is what's called a block editor when you're editing stuff. WordPress introduced it in 2018. So it's still somewhat new comparatively. But if you see these plus icons, and there's also ones up here, when you click those, it gives you options to add different blocks. And these are the different types of content that you can add. When you click browse all, you can see that there's a ton of different stuff that WordPress allows you to do. Now, where the themes come in, because themes are the way that WordPress will style your site's content, is the theme will determine how each of these different blocks look on when someone views your site. So I'm viewing my published site. If you are using the hosted site, you can click on the site title up here or hover over and there's a visit site as well. I believe in the free one, if you like hover over my sites, there should be a way to visit your site. And so this is what people see when they visit my site, when they put my domain into their browser. And so what a theme is doing is looking at this page that I've created in this visual editor and then applying some styling code to make it look like this on the front end when someone visits your site. All right. The other basic thing of WordPress that I will cover is how to change your homepage. So if you go to the settings in your menu, and then down here to the reading section, this block up here where it says your homepage displays is where you configure what your homepage is. So you can either choose your latest posts, which will put all of your posts that you've created from newest to oldest. Or you can do a static page. And this is if you've created a page like this, and then you can create it where it's just your homepage. So I've set this welcome to the Annenberg Digital Lounge one as my homepage. So when people type in my domain name, that's the page that shows up first. And then you can always click Save Changes down here to actually save those setting changes. WordPress isn't as dynamic as like a Google Docs where it doesn't always auto-save your stuff. So always just make sure to be checking out for a Save Changes or an Update button to confirm that you want to do your changes. Cool. Are we good to jump into some basics about themes? Awesome. So if you want to look at your themes, you will hover over Appearance, and then you'll go to the Themes option in the menu. And right here, you will see the themes that you have installed on your WordPress site. And so right now I have two different ones, 2024 and 2017. A little note is if you see when you're looking at themes, the year name in just words put out, that's from WordPress themselves. Like WordPress, the company, built these themes to put on sites. So I'm just using those because they're kind of the bare bones basics, but there's a lot more. Using the free WordPress.com site, you might see a little less themes available to you. But I can click Add New Theme. And because I have this fully hosted WordPress site, I get over 6,000 different options for my themes. If you're using the free WordPress.com one, it's going to be probably a lot less than that. And the nice thing about themes is that it's basically just a bunch of CSS styling code that's going to be applied to your site. So if I were to change my theme between all of these different ones, it's not going to change my page or my post content. It's not going to change the words. It's not going to change the titles, nothing like that. It's just going to change how that looks when someone visits my site. Cool. So if you look at this number and you're like, how do I determine between 6,000 plus themes, which one I should choose for my site? I recommend using this feature filter right here. So when you click on that, you get some options for how you can search for different themes that might work better for your content. There's this subject where they just kind of put a category of like, hey, I'm creating a blog. Let me see all the ones that people think are good for blogs or portfolios. The features is really nice because you can make sure that you can change custom colors as an option. So if that's really important to you, you want to use your own color scheme, you can check that. If you want to make sure that you have a full width template, like right now, mine has these big kind of white space stuff on left and right. You can look for that. And then also with the layout, you can determine if you want like one column, a 2-column site, if you want a sidebar, if you want blocks that are wider. And this is just a good way to, if you like put a couple of things in and then click apply filters, it'll take down that number to a somewhat more manageable level with the stuff that I put. And so let's say you see a preview of a theme that you like. Let's like this barbel, let's say. You can click on it and usually you should be looking out for the ratings here. So this one hasn't been rated, so I might be a little wary of this to make sure that I don't know if this actually works. Someone just published this, it might be a bad theme. So if I go to one that might have some actual ratings, I'll show you what I look for. Let's see if we can find. All right. So if I go to this like 2023, this is one of the WordPress ones. If I click on here, I can see that it has a 3.5-star rating. Not great. Usually I try to look for like 4 or above. And then also the number of ratings. The more people who've rated it and the better the rating, it's kind of like, oh, I know that this theme works for people. Once you find one that you like, you have to install it to your site. So you just click the install button. But as you notice, when I looked at my themes, and you can get back there by just clicking this appearance menu item, that I have 2 installed already. So after you've installed the themes that you want to try out, to make it active or the one that is actually being applied to your content, you have to click this activate button. So if I click activate on this 2017 one, and I go to my visit site, and then I refresh, it's going to show the same page that I had before, but with the styling of this other theme that I've activated. Cool. How are you feeling about finding a theme, putting the theme on your site? Cool. If you are using a Annenberg hosted site, there is usually storage limits for how much your site can take up on the server. An easy way to make sure that you're underneath that is to delete any of the themes that you're not going to actively use that are installed on your site. A lot of students will just like install a bunch of themes to play around with, which is great, but then they'll leave like the 20 themes that they tried going around, and those all take up space. It's also important if you're like buying your own hosting and like paying for your own website, because the more space your website takes up on a server, the more a service is going to charge you. So usually trying to keep it light, only keeping the active theme that you want installed. I have 2 because I want to show you the 2 different styles of theme editors. Cool. So with that, let's talk about the 2 different styles of theme editors. This change happened in 2022. So a lot of the newer themes for WordPress are going to use this newer one. And this you can see if you have it by under appearance, it says editor. But for the older one, so before 2022, it's going to say appearance customize. The main difference is I find that the customized one is a little bit easier to use if you're newer to WordPress, but the editor one's a little bit harder, but I do think it has a lot more options for how you can customize your theme. So I'm going to work mostly in this 2024 theme and using this newer, what's called the full site editor. Most of the same rules are going to apply to the customized one, and I'll also show you the basics of using those as well. Cool. So there are 3 ways when you have this newer full site editor, where it says appearance editor, to actually style your content. The first is going to impact everything on your site, every page, every post, every header, every footer. And that's through when you click editor, and it's going to take a little bit to load. But stuff I create here in this styles thing is going to apply to everything on my site. The next one is through these templates. So each in this newer editor, each thing has a different template. So we have pages, we have our blog home, we have a search results template, and these all apply to any page or post that has been assigned to that template. So whereas before, this styles tab is everything across your site, no matter what template it is, the templates, you can go a little bit deeper and group stuff in to style certain pages and posts differently from others. And then the last one, which is a lot more individual, is actually in the page or the post itself. So going to pages, finding the page you want to edit and clicking edit. And then there's some options in here that will only apply to this page. So we're going to start with the ones that apply to everything first, and then we'll go more specifically as we need. So if you're using one of these newer themes that has appearance editor, go there now, and then click on this styles tab. So this theme, which is the 2024 one built by WordPress, gives me 8 different variations of this theme. So by default, I have this one, but then I can click on these other ones and they'll have different colors and fonts and layouts. and I can just find one that I like by default. You know, it's generally nice to have this there. If you're using a free site, all of these other variations are probably locked behind a paywall. If I want to see how content is just going to be styled, those different blocks, I can click on this eye icon that's up here at the styles header, and this will show me the style book for this variation. And so I can see how a list is going to be, even if I don't have a list in my content, or like quotes. And so sometimes I just like to look here to make sure that this is something that is at least a good starting point for what I want. And then if you want to make edits, you click on this pencil icon right here. This is edit styles. And let me actually get back to where I turn off the eye icon to see this page that I'm using, and then edit styles. Now over here is where we're going to do all of this work that we're going to do that applies to all of our site content. This is just for that page, and you can see up here that I have this kind of black text for this page. And so this is just this page, and it's showing me a preview of what it's going to look like. If you click on Browse Styles here, it just shows you the different variations again. But then you do have three kind of main options for how you can style content across your site: typography or fonts, colors, and layout. So let's click on typography. And in here, we will see elements. And these are the font rules for different types of text on our pages across our site. So this first one is text, and this will be for anything that's like a body text, these like navigation menu text. It's just anything that's kind of just a general body default text. Links is going to be specifically for those texts that link to other pages, that link to other pieces of content. Headings are going to be for our main site title and any of our subtitles that we have throughout. Captions are going to be the captions for a video or a image, and buttons are for if you have a button block in your content. They have very similar stuff, but I'll call it what's different. So let's click into text right now, and it gives us some options here. So the first is the font, and this is the font family or the different types. So if you like Times New Roman, Arial, other ones like that. Now, it doesn't give me a ton of options. It shows me 5. And these ones are going to depend on your theme. So if you're using a different theme than I am, you might see different options here. You might see more, you might see less. And it's actually pretty much only 4 because the default one is Inter for my theme. Later on, I'll show you how to add custom CSS to this for if you're having a fully hosted WordPress site or one of the paid WordPress.com ones that you can add whatever font you can think of. And then down here, we have 5 different sizes. So we have medium, we can put it to large, extra large, XXL, or small. But you'll notice with all of these, it's kind of like a big jump between these. So if you want to go into further customization, you can click on this button right here, and you can set a custom size. Now, this is going to get a little confusing if this is new, and these are different types of units for font. Now, this theme at least doesn't allow me to do points, which is like typical if you're doing like Microsoft Word or like Google Docs. You can do like 12-point font, 14-point font. Pixels, if you want to be pretty strict about it. So if I put like 16 pixels here, all of this is the same size across my content. REM, which is a relative unit, will look at the font size that is set as the default for the entire site, multiply it by this number to get the actual font size for the elements that we're applying this to. And then EM is very similar, but instead of looking at the default font size for the whole site, it's looking at the default font size for the nearest parent element in the code. So if I open up a code for an example, right here, I have some paragraph text. And if I were to use EM for this, it's going to look at what is the font size on the div that's containing this paragraph element. Might not need to know it if you don't want to go into coding. It might just be playing around with these different stuff and seeing what looks good. Appearance is going to be your options for bolding, for italicizing. You can do a combination, make a bold and italic. And then line height is the distance between these different lines of text. I can space it out more. I can put it less. Now, let's say I like really just like mess this up somehow. Like I make it so weird and I'm like, I don't even know how to get back to what I had before. You can click on this three dot menu by typography, and it gives you options to reset to the defaults for each of these different things that I just changed, or you can just reset all at once and it'll just go back to the theme default. Some other text ones that are giving you some options. If you do links, for example, you have the option for this decoration. By default, on this theme at least, all links are underlined like this. I can do a strike through on that text. Most people won't do this for a link. It doesn't look good. Or I can also get rid of it and have no underline. I prefer to have no underline on my text, but it is personal preference. If you're going to go with no underline, I recommend that you change some other visual indicator to make sure that for your links, to show users that it's a clickable link. Again, by default, it's underline. If you don't want underline, you can get rid of it. And again, WordPress doesn't auto save. So after you've done something that you like, just save it. So I'm going to get rid of it. For headings, we have a couple more options as well. The first thing is our letter spacing. So similar to line height, this is the spacing in between the different letters. So if I had to put like 10, all of these headings would be spaced out like this. And then letter case, this is going to be how you want each of the letters to be either capitalized or underlined. By default, it is set to this like strike through, this none, which is how did you type it into your page or your post. But you can make everything uppercase. You can make it all lowercase. You can make it title case. So every first letter of every word is capitalized. I'm going to keep it at this none. So it's however I typed it into my page or my post. And I'll save. In the heading section, there are 6 levels of heading in web development. H1 is always your page title. You only have one per page. H2 is these like second most important, these like one level down headings. H3 is one more from that, and so on and so forth. And so I generally only use like an H1 through H3, but if you want to change specifically, let's say this like title, but not the subtitles down here, you can go to H1 and then change the stuff right here. So maybe I want this one to be all uppercase. And when I select this as H1, I change this to all uppercase, it's not going to apply to my H2s down here. And I'll save there. Okay, any questions about the text options here? Cool. So let's move on to colors. So let's just go back. I use the back button up here. I'll click colors. Now, by default, your theme will have this palette, and it's going to use this palette to apply to these different elements. And just like the typography section, these different elements control the color for different things on your page. So right now my text is set to this black color, and if I click on there, I have a couple of things I can do here. The first is I can use something that is in that palette. Those are all shown right here. So I can go to this orange, for example, and again, this like text one is all the body text. So all of this was changed to orange. But let's say I don't want something from my palette. I want something different. You can click into this color rectangle, and then you have your color picker right here. So you can move around in here. You can change the hue. You can change the transparency. You can put a custom hex code in here, and you can play around with that. Unlike the typography section, the color one does have something for your background. So if you want to change what the background color looks like, you can do that as well. So I can go like that. This doesn't look great, but just an example. It also gives you the option to make it as a gradient. So if you wanted to have like one color over here that fades into a different color down here, you could do that. So if I were to put, let's say, this bluish color and then this pinkish color, I can see that I have blue to pink as a gradient in my background. You have options of linear or radial. So linear goes from one side to the next, and radial goes from inside out. So the center is blue, and then it fades out to pink on the outside. And if you have linear, you can change the angle. So right now it is set from left to right. But if I wanted to, I could go like, let's say 140. And then now it's more of like a diagonal. And you can also use this thing to just kind of move it around. Also with this gradient, if you want to add an additional color, you can like click somewhere and then add another color. So if I wanted like this, like red in the middle, so now it goes like blue, red to pink. But let's say that's too much red, I might like drag it over here. And so then it just moves it down so there's more blue. You can just play around with the gradient there. And because this is looking a little intense right now, I'm gonna click on this 3-dot menu and just reset these just to get back to where we were. With links, I turned off my underline so I don't have a visual indicator that it's clickable. I can do that in the color right here. So if I click on here, I get the options to do the default, which is going to be just what it shows right now. And then a hover option. So if I wanted to maybe have it where it's green by default, but then orange when I hover over it, I can do that. And then now I can see that it changes to orange when I hover. And then with our headings and our buttons down here, they also give us the option to change the background. So for some reason you wanted like your headings to have a like kind of like a, almost like a highlighter effect, you can do that. I'm just going to clear that though. But it might be a little difficult, as you imagine, if you're changing all of these individual elements and changing their individual colors. So you can click in the palette right here. And let's say I saw that my palette had black all over here. And let's say I like where the black is placed, but I just want to change the black to a different color. I can just click there and then change the color that I want all of those black colors to change to. And I can reset it if I want. And then there's also this custom color adder. So if I click plus right here, and let's say I add my own like yellow, I can keep it as color 1. When I go back to edit these element colors, you'll see that that custom color I just added is right here now. Does anyone have questions about the colors? Cool, we'll keep going then. So the next one is layout. So when I click here at layout, I get some options for the dimensions of my site. So this is, as you can see, the width of the main content area. It's a little confusing. It is this whole thing. This little indicator right here, it looks like you're configuring the height, but it's actually the width of your content. So right now I have like these really big white spaces on each side. And that's because my content is sent to 620 pixels wide. So it's going from here to here, and that's 620 pixels. Now I can change that, let's say, to like 1,000, and it's gonna stretch it out a little bit more. I have less of that white space on each side. However, just like when we were talking about the font size, that its pixels are pretty like strict, there's also some more relative units. So this second one, I know it's a little small on the screen, is a percentage. And so if I said 100%, it's going to go to the full width that it allows me to go in WordPress. Now you might be wondering, okay, if I put 100%, the full width, why do I still have some stuff right here? That's because I have this left and right padding by default. In web development, how content sizes are determined is it's first by the actual content, and then there's some padding, which goes between your content and your border. Then there's a border, which can be visible or invisible. And then there's a margin outside of that. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can configure how your content looks. So if I start decreasing this padding, you'll notice that it starts going all the way to left and right. And again, we're in the styles, which is impacting everything on my site. I could also add padding from the top and the bottom, which will just put it on top of everything and on bottom of everything. I'm going to put at least a little bit of a margin back in, this padding between the sides. Both of these, you can also use the custom stuff as well, using pixels, percentages, these relative units, or you can also click on this for kind of padding option to configure specifically top, right, bottom, or left. Because right now these are top and bottom or left and right. But if you only wanted, let's say, something on the right, you could change that. Block spacing is going to be the distance between those different blocks. So as you like add content to your pages and your posts, you're adding them as different, like a paragraph block, a heading block, an image block. And this block spacing determines how much space is in between those different blocks. You will notice though that I do have this one that's not actually changing between them. That's because there's somewhere more specific that is a different setting. Okay, how do we feel about layout? Cool. And so the last thing here that you might have noticed is this blocks section. So right now we've just in general typography, in general colors, etc. But let's say you want to go a little bit further and say, hey, I want all of my images to have a different setting. You can go to blocks and then find which block you want to change for across the whole site. So I can click image and I get some options here. So I can, for example, add a like pixel border, and this will apply to every image I have on my site. I can change the radius, and this is going to make it rounded or not. There's this duotone filter. So if I wanted it to have like this kind of more artsy graphic design effect, I can do that. And then there's this expand on click. So if you click on the image, it blows it up bigger when the user's trying to look at it. So a lot of these block ones are just playing around, seeing what the different blocks are, and then configuring how you want them to look here. So if I have paragraph text specifically, because right now, remember when we changed the text color, the fonts, it also impacted our like navigation menu items and stuff like that. I might just want to change the paragraph ones, and I have the same options of colors and typography if I wanted to change those to make them different from everything else. So as you can see, there's a ton of blocks to play around with and figure out what you're using and how you want it to look on your page. Okay, before I show you the templates and how to edit your templates, I want to show the older version of the theme editor. So I'm going to change to this 2017 one, and this is the customize option. So when I click on customize, you'll see instead of that where there's like a styles pane on the other side and there's stuff in the middle with content, this is more menu based. And so I can go to site identity right here, and where it says WordPress workshop, I could say maybe I want to change it to like hello, and that changes it there. I could add a tagline like Annenberg Digital Lounge. And all of these options are going to differ based on which theme you chose. So all of the ones that have appearance customized are going to have different options in this menu. I've seen some that have like 3 and some that have like 100 something. And it does allow me to change some colors, but again, as you see, not as much. So I can say I want a light theme, I want a dark theme. I can do custom, but you'll notice it only changes certain elements. So in this case, it's all my headings. And if you're working with one of these that have appearance customized, you'll see all of these pencil icons listed in different places. And this just means that there's some setting over here that you can configure. So if I see this one right here and I can click, it's going to take me to this header media, where right now there's this default picture of a succulent. And I can change it and add it to a video. I can change the image right here. I can like randomize it, which it looks like I only have one. So those pencil icons can really help if you're not quite sure where to go to edit those specific ones. And again, this one doesn't autosave. This one you have to click publish up right here. Okay, how do we feel about the like full sites editing or changing things across your entire site? Cool. I know it takes a lot of just playing around, practicing with it. So I'm going to go back to this 2024 one where it has this editor, and we're going to talk about templates now. And so this one is only available in these newer full site editors where it says appearance editor. If I go to templates and I go to pages, for example, this is the template that is going to apply to all of my pages. And you'll notice that it is very basic right now. And it's very like placeholder stuff. And you actually want it to be like that because This is going to apply to every piece of content that you have the template set to pages. I've seen a number of students who come to the Digital Lounge and say, hey, like, why is my site not working? And it's because they built their whole like content in a template that applies to every page. And so when they like click on the About Me page, it doesn't actually take them to their About Me page. It just shows the template and what they put in here. So highly recommend you don't click in and edit and change the title and write your whole article in here and add images, because those will then apply to every page you create, no matter what the content is. What you can do here, though, that I recommend is these editing options with styles. So if you clicked in here, you'll notice that I see this purple up here that says pages. That lets me know that I'm editing a template. And then I can click over here on this circle that's like half filled in, and I see those same options for typography, for colors, for layout. Now, these ones aren't going to apply to my entire site anymore. These are just going to apply to the stuff that has a template set to pages. So for example, if I have my colors, let's say I go to heading, and let's say I do orange and I save. So not by default, but I do have my homepage set to that pages template. So I can see all of these headers with orange. But if I were to change that by going into my page and editing it, I can see over here I have the template option when I'm editing my page. So if I were to change it from pages to like page no title, for example, and then update, I'm going to see that it's going to be different because it got rid of my title. It still does have this because the rest of that template has the same stuff as here. But even though I put my title in here and it shows an orange, because I don't have it set to the right template, it's not going to show how I want it to. And so when you have styling that you don't want to apply to your whole site, just to certain pieces of content, I recommend going into the templates and then playing around with some of the styling here. Now, let's say you go to your pages and you kind of like mess it up a bunch. You can go back in, and when you're selecting stuff in the styles, you can go to like the colors and find out where it is, and then again reset that to the default in case if you mess a bunch of stuff up. If I were to like really do some weird stuff, like I change this to this is, oh, it's actually even blocking me from doing it. So if I were to accidentally mess it up though, there usually is something that pops up right here that'll say the three dot menu, and you can clear all the customizations if I were to really kind of mess it up. Now there's also this thing called patterns, which you can see down here. We've gone through the styles, we have the templates, and then there's these patterns. And patterns are pre-grouped together elements that you would add to your site. So for example, if I go to my down here to template parts and I click on header, I can see this header that I am seeing across my site where it says hello, and then it says my menu. And so if I don't want to accidentally go into the template and mess it up, I can go here into this header, click the edit button, and then do some editing here. With this full site editor, something that is a little funky to get used to is editing your navigation menu. So how you do that is you find that template part, the pattern, the template that has it, and you have to click in there, and then you'll get this plus icon. And if you click the plus icon, you will get how you can add a page to your menu. So I will see some things right here about some posts and pages that I've created. I can also search for them, and I could add this homepage that I have. But that's a pretty long page title, so I can click this link icon and then click the edit button, and I can change the title. So I could just change this to home instead. And so it still points to the same thing, but it's just a shorter title. And when I save this, it's actually going to apply to this header template part, which is included in my page template right here. So if I click in here, they'll tell me that it's my header part. And I can click edit to jump into there. And because that template is applied to this page, I can see those changes right here. Cool. Any questions about templates, these patterns, stuff that are a little bit more unique than the full site's editing stuff in the styles tab? Cool. So now we're going to go one step further into our kind of theme editing funnel. So we started with the global site editing in the styles that applies to our entire site. We then went to these groups with these templates and patterns, but there's also some options in your individual pages and posts that you can do. So if I go to pages and I'm gonna click edit on this page that I've been playing around with, over here I have this sidebar and it's gonna have some general page setting options. And then there's also block ones. So when you select a block, it's going to give you some settings that you can do specifically for this block. This will not apply to this image down here or this image down here. It's not going to apply to images that use the same template. It's not going to apply to images on pages that don't use this template. It's just specifically for this one itself. If you don't see this sidebar, it is just this toggle button up here, where it's like a square with a kind of line closer to the right. And you also do get some options in here as well in this contextual toolbar. This first one is if you want to change it to a different type of block. So right now it's an image block, but maybe I want to change it to like a media and text one. So I have an image and text, or maybe I want to change it to a cover. So it's like a background image with some text on top. This button allows you to drag and drop it in the flow. So if I wanted to move the image down, I could just do that, or I can use these tools to move it up or down as well by one. And then the rest of this stuff is going to be different based on which block you have selected. So right now I have an image. So I have this duotone filter. I have the alignment. I can add a caption. I can make it a link so it links to somewhere. I can crop it. I can add text over it. I can change the image. But when I switch to the paragraph text, I can see that I get different options here. So I can click bold if I actually highlight the text. And now just the stuff in this block will be bolded. You can also see that I have this paragraph block selected. And then over here in my block settings, I do have the options to change the color specifically. So right now, you'll see that it has no color selected. And that's because we are using the color from somewhere that is less specific than this block, probably from our full site editing stuff that we're doing before. So if I click this text and I change it to green, it's only going to change for this specific block and not impact any other text on my site. And I do also have those options of making it bigger or smaller. If I can highlight, if you want like one thing to be bigger for some reason and smaller, and then you do have those like more custom controls as well. A lot of the same options, just the difference is this is per block on this specific page instead of those more general applying to multiple different elements at once. All right. Do we feel good about the different levels of editing your styling? Cool. So you may notice as you get through, if I, for example, am selecting this block and I only see the size for the typography, you can click on this three-dot menu and it'll give you some more options that you can do. So maybe I want drop cap and I want to turn it on so that the first letters big in my paragraph. I could also, if I wanted specifically the font family to be different, I could change it just for that paragraph. So if you don't see options here, click the three-dot menu and see if there's the option in here that you want. Now, if you look there and it's still not there, or like, for example, this font family, I only get these few options and I want to do even more customization, something that's completely different. This is when we probably want to start looking at adding some custom CSS code to our site. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you're using this free WordPress.com site where you go to WordPress.com and you click login and it's your sites, this will probably not be an option for you. So if you are not interested in staying for something that you can't even do on your site, You don't need to. I will not be offended. But if you do have a more hosted site, or you are interested in learning some basic CSS code, this is what we're about to do. So CSS is the coding language that's used to style sites. So when we were changing the colors and the font families and different stuff like that, we actually were just doing this visual editor to change our site's CSS code. And CSS is connected to HTML, which is what adds all the text and the images and stuff like that. You can see if you click on like your image, for example, and you click this three-dot menu, there's this edit as HTML option, and it shows you that HTML code for that block. And then you can also do edit visually to go back and see the image itself. Now, CSS, you write it using rules. I'm going to go through very basic CSS today. If you want to learn a little bit more, I'm teaching a web coding series right now on Mondays. This week we did HTML. Next week, Monday, also at 11, we're doing CSS. The week after that, we're doing some more intermediate CSS. But today we're just going to go through super basic. The first thing you need in a CSS rule is what's called a selector. And this tells the code which types of content on your site that you want to apply a certain style to. So in this case, I have P, and this is going to apply to all of my paragraph text. And I can see that if I go to here and I find my paragraph text, and I do edit as HTML, I can see that it opens up with this P element, this P tag. And then we have what's called a declaration block, which contains one or more different styling rules. This one's very basic, it just contains one, but you can also have multiple listed in one declaration block, kind of like in this code right here. And so each declaration is a different styling rule, and it contains a property and a value. So the property is the type of style that you want to change. So in this case, it's color. So that's your foreground color, or like your text color. There's a bunch of other ones as well. And then it also has a value. And this is more of the actual thing that you want to see. So in this case, I am saying select all of my body text and change the text color to blue. Now, thankfully, WordPress theme styling allows us to do that with our block editing. Remember, we went to our site editor on these newer themes. We went to styles, we went to edit, and when it loads, I can go to blocks, change paragraph, and then change the text to a blue. And I can see that that happens here. That did the same exact thing as this code does. So I just did it without using code. I'm gonna reset that. Now, CSS can be a little finicky because you have to pay attention to how specifically you are targeting a given element. And there's 4 basic ways that you can tell the code which types of elements you want to apply a styling rule to. That sample that I showed you of this P element selects all of our paragraph elements. So that's right down here. And this goes in order from most specific to least specific. And so if I have my paragraph text set to blue here on my element level, and then there's some other rule at the class level, which I'll explain what that is in a little bit, where that color is maybe set to green, let's say, then the green is going to be applied and not this blue. The other thing that can be a little tricky is when you have multiple rules at different parts in the code. If when your browser is reading your code, it goes from top to bottom. So if I were to look at this sample site that I have been creating, it starts from the top of my HTML code and it reads down through the code, and then it starts displaying them from top to bottom. Down here, I have a link to a style sheet. And let's say I have one here, and let's say I put one right below it as well. And let's say in this top one, I say my paragraph text should be blue, and the bottom one, I say my paragraph text should be green. It's going to read through this code, and then say, hey, there's a style sheet. Let's look at that. And it's going to say, okay, cool. It says change all the paragraph text to blue. So do that. But then in the next one, if it says change it to green, it's going to apply the green instead of the blue. just because it's reading from top to down. So whatever comes later in your code will be what actually happens. The other thing is that there's 3 different ways to add CSS to your code through this link to an external style sheet, these style tags right here, and this inline style attribute in the HTML. This is more general. This is a little bit more specific, and this is the most specific. So even if I put this link to the yellow below this more specific one here, this blue is still going to be applied just because this style equals is only targeting one specific element. And so the code's saying, hey, that's really important because you're only applying it to one thing. So we're going to do that instead of all of these other conflicting rules. That's a lot. If you don't understand it, that's okay. So you might be wondering, is it worth it to go into each element and go edit as HTML, see what this is to try to figure out which selector to use and what's more specific to make sure that your code is going to be applied? There's a much easier way to do it. If you open up your site, like you're viewing it, so you go to the domain in Chrome specifically. Safari and Firefox also have like similar things. I only know how to do this in Chrome. So that's what I'm going to show you. If you control click, if you're on a Mac, or right click if you're on Windows, or if you go view developer and then developer, it will open up in this side panel the code that builds this web page. And so in the elements, I can see all of the HTML code. And in the styles, I can see all of the CSS code. If I click on this button right here, which is this square with an arrow, and then I hover over, let's say, my title, and I click there, it'll highlight it in my HTML code, and it will show me all of the CSS rules that are being applied to that element. Now, you might notice, for example, that this font size down here at H1, which this is our selector, which selects every page title. It says font size 2 EM, but it's has a strike through from it. And that's because there is something, a conflicting rule that says font size that's more specific. So this is that H1. So that's this element. And so I can look through here to see, hey, is there some other thing that's more specific than this H1? And yes, it's here up in this other H1. That might be a little confusing. This is because this comes directly from WordPress and this one comes from Chrome. You can also click on this computed tab, and this will only show you what's actually being applied to it, not all of those extra ones. But let's say you want to look at font family because you're like, hey, I don't really like Cardo. That was like one of the 4 options that WordPress gave me, but I want to change it. You can do this toggle, and then you can see how specific this is being applied to. So right here is the element. So I know that I need to go something a little bit more specific, like a class or an ID. Now, the great thing is that in Chrome DevTools, my HTML code is already highlighted. And so I can look here and I can see that class is already set. So it has 2 values. It has text align center and WP block post title. WordPress is pretty good about naming their classes. So if I wanted to change the font family to my own font that didn't appear in that drop-down list, I can use one of these classes to target it more specifically than this element. Because remember, class is more specific than element. And so how you can do that is go to your template editor. So with the styles, and then click on this edit styles. And again, this is only available if it's a paid WordPress account. You can click on this more option, and there's additional CSS right here. And when I click that, I can add the CSS code right here. So I'm going to show up here. I can go back to my Chrome developer tools. And if I'm seeing text align center and a block a post title, I'm probably going to change all of my post titles to the same font. So I probably want to use the second class, but you could use either of them. This is just because it's probably going to apply to any text that has a center alignment. And this one is going to do all of our titles. So how you type the CSS code to target all of the stuff that has this class is you put in a period and then you type in the class name. So in this case, mine is WP block post title. And then I do a opening kind of curly bracket. And then I type in the actual CSS code that I want. So in this case, it's going to be font family, and then the colon, and then whatever I want it to set to. So I'm going to put Times New Roman, and you can see that it changed my font to Times New Roman. And that wasn't even an option that WordPress gave me. And when I click save and I refresh over here, I can see now in my computed that it's giving it that Times New Roman font because it's overriding these other ones that were set by the theme. That was just a lot about something very technical. Does anyone have questions about it? Cool. So you might add some stuff in here and you might wonder why it's not actually being applied. And remember, I talked a little bit about these multiple style sheets. So in the Chrome developer tools, it gives me a little warning of where that is in the code. So if I go back to elements, I can click on where it says index 128, and I can see that it is here in this code that is building up this site, this page specifically. And if I scroll up, I can try to see where it is. So in this case, it is, there's a lot in this one, in where it says style ID equals global styles inline CSS. And if I go back to my elements to see the HTML, and I open up this head section, which is the metadata section and where you're linking your CSS, I can see that that's right here. Now you may notice that I do have style ID down here and also one right here. So if I write something in here, this is where my custom CSS is going, that conflicts with something that's right here, it's not actually going to apply. And I can open these up and see what CSS code is in here to kind of see like, hey, what can I not change essentially? Cool. Any questions about anything that we've gone through? Cool. So I'll just show you some kind of tips specifically about fonts and colors as well. So when you're writing CSS, there is named colors. So this is like 140 just like names of different colors that are very basic that you can just put like color equals chocolate. And it'll give you this actually orangish color, which is a little interesting. But you can use these, but they also have all of these hex codes because there's definitely more than like this amount of colors in the world. So you might want something that's a little bit more unique. And how you can do that is if you go to something like Adobe Color, you can play around with like a color theme, for example. And so let's say you're like, hey, I really like this kind of like blue and green kind of stuff. I can then copy these and put them in either my code, or I can actually also put them in my colors here as well. So maybe I really like this palette of stuff, and then I can create and change my palette in here in my WordPress thing, so I don't even have to touch the code. What's great about Adobe Color too is they have different color harmony rules. So right now this is at this analogous one, but if I wanted monochromatic, so they're all just like very similar stuff, I can change these color harmony stuff. I can make it custom so I can truly play around with and make something completely different. But what if you like see an image somewhere and you're like, hey, I really like that color theme. I want to use it on my WordPress site. You can go to this extract theme option and select a file. And so like I have something that's like a poster of Paris, for example, this kind of low poly poster. And then when you put it in, it'll give you a sample color theme from this image. And then I can just take these different hex codes, go into my editor, and start playing around with and changing what I want. So I can put it in this hex and then change it to that exact color from that image. As you can imagine, as you're adding all these fun custom colors that you like, you could end up with something that looks really bad on the web. And so another option is this website called Real-Time Colors. And this allows you to randomize color themes and see how it looks like on a sample website. So I can just press spacebar to keep randomizing until I find something I like. They also have options to change to like a dark theme to see how the color looks on a dark theme website. And with all of these, when you click on each of these different elements, it'll give you that specific color code as well. And the last thing is more about fonts. So something about fonts, and especially with websites, is not all computers have the same fonts installed. And so I'm on a Mac which has certain fonts installed on it. Other people might be on other Macs or Windows, and they don't have the same fonts that I do. And so if I were to put like a truly like custom font on there, it might not show up on the site when other people visit it if they don't have that font installed. And so CSS Font Stack will show you what are called web safe fonts. And these are fonts that are generally installed on most computers. And it actually gives you the percentages here. So for example, Calibri has like 83% on Windows, but only 38-ish% on Mac. So when you're editing the code, for example, if you're doing something with fonts, you can add what's called a fallback font. So if for some reason Times New Roman isn't on the person's site, I can put a comma and then put some other one. And so what this is essentially telling the site is, hey, if the user has Times New Roman on their computer, display the post title in Times New Roman. If they don't, do it in Verdana. And so normally I go to this site to see, hey, what are some ones that I know will show up on most? I try to pair ones that are a lot on Windows and a lot on Mac. So if I'm going to pick this one that is apparently 0% on Windows, it's Avant-Garde. It's also only 1% on Mac, so I don't know why it's included on this site. But if I pick one that's like always on Windows, but rarely on Mac, I'd probably pick a backup that's always on Mac, but rarely on Windows. Cool. If you want to know more about what types of the CSS you can add, if you go to w3schools.com and under tutorials, there's CSS reference, and it shows a bunch of different properties that you can do. And then when you click on one, like if you do border, it'll show you how you can write it. So it's easy to add this to your WordPress site if you combine getting the selector from Chrome DevTools and then using something like W3 Schools to see how a property is written. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about what I did cover, something I haven't covered that you're curious about? Cool. So that's all from me. I encourage you to play around with your WordPress sites. Don't be afraid to do some styling, to change some things. Just some key reminders if you're going to write content for pages or posts, do it in the post or the page on this main menu and not the templates for pages or posts, because then it's going to apply to everything that you create.